I'm in shock. Where's Rudy? Where is he? I will say this. If in fact Rudy took pictures of these people doing their First Amendment rights, and that was then sent and they were evicted, he should be fired.
Foundation of Los Angeles. We're all here this afternoon because we have a housing authority that believes it is above the law. It violates the Brown Act with a flawed public hearing process that meant that few tenants have been able to voice their opposition to a plan that privatizes their housing. They then seem to believe that public housing tenants have no First Amendment rights to free speech or free assembly.
Justice is not a crime, but putting innocent families on the street is. Residents of public housing have the big issue that's called Section 8 conversion. HACLA has proposed a tenant emplacement disposition for some, but one-day odd developments. Residents from the Housing Authority developments do not agree with HACLA's plan.
Estamos aquí solicitando el apoyo de las autoridades correspondientes.
We are here to request support from the authority, corresponding authority,
para que sean respetados nuestros derechos.
For our rights to be respected.
People have been identified as having been directly involved in threatening and harassing and imprisoning Mr. Montiel and his family. Those 9 have been served with 30-day notices to quit for violation of specific provisions of the standard lease agreement approved by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which prohibits both threats against housing authority personnel and illegal or criminal activity regardless of arrest or conviction. And it specifically states that in the lease agreement.
Watch the video of the people at Rudy Montiel's house. And while none of us would want people to be knocking on their door and stuff, let me tell you something. I have people visiting my house these days, and just to see if I'm there. And I can tell you that you don't see me trying to file restraining orders against people who are knocking on my door.
A group of over 50 individuals, some carrying loudspeakers and bullhorns, were bussed to the private residence of Mr. Montiel in September of 2010 on a Sunday afternoon. With only a few exceptions, all of these individuals walked onto Mr. Montiel's lawn. They walked onto his driveway. They surrounded his vehicle and entered onto his private veranda. These individuals cut off any route of escape to Mr. Montiel and his family. Of these individuals,
we can have order in the chamber,
if I may have the same courtesy we showed others.
Of course.
Of these individuals, approximately 9 have been specifically and definitively identified to date as having been part of a mob who rushed the closed gated entry foyer surrounding Mr. Montiel's front door, began pounding on the door and windows of the house, screaming and shouting threats and demands. The Montiels were imprisoned by this screaming and shouting mob for fear of their safety and their lives until sufficient numbers of local sheriff deputies could be assembled to safely de-escalate this group. This contingent consisted of nearly 20 deputy sheriffs from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department and an air unit that they required in order to de-escalate this group. For over an hour, the Montiel family was held captive in their own home, afraid that at any moment this unruly crowd, being exhorted on by people with bullhorns and loudspeakers, would crash through the front doors or windows of their home and attack them in their own house.
I went and met a couple Saturdays ago at Rancho San Pedro with many of those who then received eviction notices to hear their side of the story. And after I heard their side of the story, you know, I felt that what they did was perfectly within their rights of free speech and protesting. It's not a criminal to be a community activist. It's not a crime. It's not a crime to want to get the attention of the executive director who really decides sort of who lives and who dies in our public housing developments. They had tried many times to get a meeting with Mr. Montiel. They had tried to show up at meetings where he was to talk. and he refused to meet with them. My own staff member went to the commission meeting when they were beginning to talk about this disposition, and he was not allowed to speak. My own staff concerned about the conflict of interest between Rudy Montiel getting funds from the federal government and also getting funds from this nonprofit who now he wants to turn over our public housing to. I think that's a conflict of interest.